Welcome back to The Exchange, a podcast presented by Covoya Specialty Coffee and hosted by Mark Inman and Todd Mackey. That's right, you heard me. I said Mark Inman, who has returned to Covoya as a trader and is once again partnering with Todd Mackey to host The Exchange, produced by me, Mike Ferguson. I'm so happy to be back in the producer chair for this unscripted podcast. This is Season 4, Episode 1, and the topic is coffee roasting from hobby to business. How does that even happen? And now, I'm very pleased and proud to once again be able to say, here they are, Mark and Todd.
Listeners of all kinds, get ready for a familiar voice coming to you from the present, a hallmark of the past. The Exchange returns in full glory. Mark, would you bring us in?
Season 4, baby.
Here we go.
We're back.
We are back, but with some new twists. It's nice to be here with you, Mark, and Mr. Mike Ferguson with a hot microphone for The Exchange.
It's dang hot.
Dang hot.
Dang hot.
Brought to you by Covoya Specialty Coffee. Mark.
Yes.
Everybody wants to know, what are you doing here? I mean, let's not forget, you did have a cameo.
Yeah, I did.
Recording from
Live,
the SCA show floor.
Live on the floor, yeah.
But we had no idea things were going this way. It's been 4 years.
Been 4 years. Unbelievable. There's been a pandemic.
You don't look a day of it, I have to say.
Did you hear that? I'm talking to my wife now. Did you hear that? He's right. 4 years. There was a pandemic that happened.
Yeah.
I had a sojourn with Sustainable Harvest, which came to an end when they were acquired, and then had a sojourn with Mercon Specialty, where that has changed as far as the nature of that company, and received I cannot make this point well enough. I received a very heartwarming text that really caught me off guard and kind of changed the nature of what I was thinking of doing. And it was from our producer, Mike Ferguson, who said, it's time to come home. And it really stuck with me. And that prompted me to reach out to Rob Stephen and said, I want to have a conversation about this, if it's even possible. And that conversation flourished. Now, I was hoping that part of that conversation would be that the podcast would come back. I really wanted that to happen. And it did. And here we are today. So
here we are on your second day back.
Yeah.
And the only reason, mind you, that we're recording on day 2,
right,
was to give you a moment to gain your bearings so that I didn't just bury you with delicious insights for our listeners.
Well, today, like I prided myself on in Season 1 and Season 2, is that I overly prepare for these episodes to stay about 10 steps ahead of you.
Yeah, I do exactly the opposite. I thrive on the moment.
Right. And if you go back, episodes like the holiday, the scary defects episodes, I researched, proper movie pairings that, take time. So today's subject is another one that I took a lot of time coming up with. And it's like, because it was such a great idea and something that it has some funny stories behind it. So again, well prepared for Season 4. Here we are at The Exchange.
Yeah. And I'd love to, I think I'd be remiss, I should say, to not kick it over to Mike Ferguson to recap for our listeners what we've been doing in these 4 years from our side, as well as you've been so well said, sojourning with and through the coffee world with other groups.
Well, we did have a Season 3 of The Exchange, sort of a mixed bag. Did some interviews. We've introduced some new shows and under the umbrella of the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network. And we are in an actual real live studio.
Yeah, an impressive studio.
Yeah. So, we're ready to roll.
Yeah. So what can we expect in this season? Are we going to see installations from all of these sub shows? And
we sure will. You guys will be recording an Exchange every month. We'll do extra shots, the audio blogs. We'll continue to do that. Mm-hmm. And we'll be introducing All About Coffee, a page-by-page podcast, which is going through Euchre's All About Coffee one page at a time.
Oh, boy.
And
nerd alert.
I've got, it's super nerd alert. I've got, the script is done for episode 1. It's 7,000 words, and we don't even get into the text. It's all just biography, background, and then the front matter, which is all the pages that you flip through to get to the text.
And you're reading this?
Yeah, I've written the script.
I'm not a gigantic TV buff, but who's the guy from Parks and Rec who has basically you sit and watch him drink an entire bottle of
Oh yeah,
Nick Offerman.
Like that's kind of the same idea. Ron. Just listening to you read a massive tome for people will marathon this.
Well, I'm not going to actually read every page. I'll read something from every page.
You were starting,
but it'll be talking about like it's just endless annotations.
Yeah,
it's like Euchre's annotated, and I'm the annotator.
I think
I love
just
that.
an idea. If you haven't considered, I think this should be also released in video platform, and you should be sitting in front of a fireplace.
Yeah,
in a
exactly a crackling fire.
Yeah,
yeah, and you could hear the shifting of his weight every once in a while when he.
Yeah,
that's a hypnotic video.
I love the idea of that.
That video of Offerman's hypnotic.
It's amazing. Yeah.
We're glad to be back. We certainly want to bring lots to the table for everyone who's tuning in. We're excited to carry on with some of the innovations of season 3, and couldn't be more excited to share it with you guys. So, what's today's episode, Mark? What are we going to get into?
Today's episode is coffee companies that started out as hobbies that turned into full-fledged empires. As far as you want to take that subject, and
full-fledged empires,
it could be however you defined an empire, but people that started out, coffee as a side hustle, a hobby, and then decided to get into the industry, but actually took it very far.
Sure. So hobby to business, hobby to viable business.
Yeah, that was the official from the producer, the official title, but beyond a business, like how. Ideally, I brought some thunder today to people that took it pretty far.
Yeah. Well, before we get into real world examples of which there are a number, and we'll certainly have hot takes on this, I want to go ahead and collectively let's define hobby and let's define viable business, right? But besides, we can talk about what an empire is potentially along the way, but let's just define those two terms so we can kind of show a starting point and talk about where that threshold is. So
I think for me, the hobby is the transition is when people who aren't family and friends are paying you to roast coffee or purchasing your coffee.
So so you would argue, let's say I am getting free green samples out the back door of a green coffee importing company.
That's a good idea.
Office.
That's a great idea.
And I'm roasting in a garage, and maybe I use like a mailing zip code as a certain boundary,
right?
For which I can deliver coffee, albeit it's not paying a full-time wage. Like we can say, like it's not going to cover minimum wage for a full-time position,
right?
In the local area, but it's something that is creating revenue, and that revenue is coming from not family. Is that a business?
I think it is.
Even though it's not there's no primary full-time employee.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about whether
owner-operator,
successful business or whatnot, or going concern.
Well, that's what I mean. I think I mean,
not
if
to
get lost in the details, but
if that's
okay,
business,
so licensure. Okay,
yeah.
I just want to be clear because I do think that it's a very squishy space, right?
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people in the specialty space have gotten caught in between, and just for the sake of our listeners who might feel at times in that limbo space, for lack of a better description, it'd be good to kind of say, okay, here are the transition points, and here's the levers we've seen people pull, because I think that's a really valuable key. For someone who's listening who might empathize as being in the middle. Well,
I would also say that during the pandemic, a phenomenon that I found fascinating were a significant amount of people that reached out to I mean, I'm assuming they did it to you as well, that were...
We never hear from anybody. They only reach out to you.
Yeah, they all that were like, working from home or work furlough during the pandemic, and either bought with their PPP money, they got a really nice home espresso setup or a small roaster, and they were calling importers looking, they didn't know how the game worked. Like, hey, can I buy 5 pounds of green? Or, they started these dialogues. And in some case, when they realized, if you sold like split bags, they would, oh, okay, I'll try. What do you recommend? And these people over the course of the pandemic were roasting for their friends and their family. And then they started selling pounds to their coworkers who are also at home. And a lot of those business fast forward post pandemic are now businesses. They left whatever they were doing and they're now full-fledged coffee professionals. And I interacted with maybe 20 or 30 people like that during the pandemic that were like screenwriters and people that had like real jobs, lawyers, and that were doing this as a side hobby just to pass the time, and it turned into a company.
Yeah. I mean, which is a story. It's not a story unique to the pandemic, but it's a story that's been, I think, really ingrained in the specialty coffee narrative for many years. So just to close the loop, viable business. Like, let's get past the middle space, that limbo, and like what makes a viable business a viable business.
How fine of a line are you trying to draw on this?
I'm just trying to
support your point.
I think it's important to say, to really kind of define. I would say something to the extent of like, there is a sustainable income for one or more workers, whether that's owner or
but owner
employee.
Operator that can sustain themselves would be a business.
That it is justifiable for that individual at the minimum to show up to work every day and do the job, serve the customers, collect the monies, and continue the next day. And profit, obviously, over the long term, without profit, it becomes quite myopic to be in that position, running only like, net even. But of course, I think that's still a viable business, meaning, hey, in theory, that owner operator can at some point hire someone to do that job. And even if they hold the company at little to no profit, they can still operate the business. It is sustainable in that regard. And again, I think that's important just to say, okay, here we go. This company has passed through, and these other companies have not. Not that we're casting judgment from studio. What's the name of the studio here?
It's the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Studio.
Yeah, not that we're casting judgment from the Exchange Podcasting Studio, but to say, okay, in these cases, hey, someone can be introspective and say, where do I fall on this spectrum?
Right. As well as, I think what's interesting about this subject is encourage more people to do this.
Sure.
I think it's still to this day will work.
Okay.
You tend to disagree a bit. We talked a bit last night.
I do.
I do not. I think it's absolutely viable. More so now than ever, probably.
Wow. I could not disagree with you more.
And that's why we're here.
Let's, how do you want to crack things open? I mean, do you want to, you're most welcome to start with like one of what sounds like many examples that classically defines the sort of coffee dream.
Well,
if you will.
the one that came to mind when I saw the subject, and it actually started the following two examples I'm going to bring up that aren't going to be as impressive. The first one is impressive. So when I owned TaylorMade Farms in California, I was doing wholesale to the Western states, and I got pretty large, and I was 100% organic. I had a working organic farm. I was writing about organic. I was doing recycled cans. The loring was just in its infancy. It was all a big green thing. And I was really touting myself as I'm one of the only people out here doing this real, lefty push into sustainable specialty specialty coffee. And
Mark, just very quickly, are you using yourself as the
No,
example?
No, not
Continue,
even close,
please.
because I did not start out as a hobby. And so I had a pretty good lock on the Bay Area as far as people that were interested in those subject matters. I had them, and I was not losing them. And then in 2002, I started losing accounts in Oakland. And it was happening at a pretty rapid pace. And these were like significant accounts, not small ones. And they were like, oh, no, we're going with this small guy who's been doing roasting out of his garage. And he's starting to sell at the farmers markets. And he's 100% organic. He's way into sustainable ag. And I'm like, compared to what? I mean, I've got a farm. Like, I'm working internationally. A guy in his garage roasting. Who cares? Like, are you kidding me right now? And I was getting very defensive because I didn't want to lose these accounts, and it just kept happening and happening. And now where I was based was a good hour-and-a-half drive to Oakland. So it was somewhat challenging for me to give these customers full service trainings. And, it was an effort because of the distance. And I kept losing these accounts. And then I heard, oh, he's opening a cafe in a roll-up garage, like a roll-up facility. Like, it almost sounded like a storage unit. He rolled the door up and put a cart against it and was going. And I go, who could this possibly be? Oh, his name's James Freeman, and he was a former clarinet player, and he just got into roasting, but he's really into sustainability. And again, it's like, what is his background in sustainability? And he continued to grow. And at the time I was like, this guy knows nothing. He is not even a viable player, and he will not last. And fast forward, this is the empire of Blue Bottle Coffee. And I've recounted this story, James, because I have worked with him, for years. And, it's very funny to him because he does remember taking these accounts from me. And for him, it was the opposite end of like, wow, I'm like actually arriving because I'm knocking down big players in the industry. But the interesting thing about James is he started doing roasting out of his house, and the original model was roasting at home and doing home delivery for people around the neighborhood. And it was 6 pounds at a batch. And I remember that story sticking with me. And when I had my son, he was 7, and when I grew up, my parents wanted me to start a company to learn about, billing and how to read a profit and loss statement and just the basics of business, how to interact with people. And so I was encouraged to do that when I was young, and I encouraged my son to do the same. And at 7 years old, he said, I want to start roasting coffee because his mother and I were both in the industry. And I said, what about a home delivery, like on your bike, like a paper route? And it was borrowing James's original idea. And so my son grew this business to wholesale accounts in wineries and galleries and a running store. The running company was printing, thermos bottles with my son's logo on it and selling T-shirts. I mean, he took it on his own. Like, he really embraced this kid doing this thing. And that company still exists today. My son's almost 20 years old. And now my stepkids started there. So I have dueling brands in the garage. They started doing the same thing with their network, and it's called Sequin Coffee. And it's
interesting. And do they rent that space from Cooper then? Or?
No, they bought their own roaster, and they established
they have them side
line
by
of
side.
Demarcation. Yes, different
Holy
blends,
hell.
different whole philosophy. But they have grown significantly faster than Cooper did when he started. Because Cooper's not actually, initially it was home delivery by his bike. Well, he became, he got a car and he got also enamored with wholesale businesses. So he basically dropped the home delivery thing, but the home delivery thing works. And that's to fast forward to my defense, to take my position here on this statement, is that no matter, I still am a firm believer, as much as we in the industry love to compare coffee to wine, it's actually more comparable to fresh baked goods, and freshness trumps everything. You could be in love with whatever coffee brand you want, but if you can get something fresh, it will always taste better. And so if you can deliver high quality, fresh and local, you're going to have a hook. Now, how far can you take that hook? That's to be determined by where you live. But in their case, these children that are 13 and 16 make enough money. Well, one bought a car and is able to she could self-sustain just off her half of the profits, let alone there's two partners in that particular business. But that's a viable operation. Again,
what percentage
taken from the genius
what percentage of their overall revenue does cost of goods make up?
Well, they actually purchase coffee. They're an account. They buy coffee from Covoya Specialty Coffee.
Awesome. I'm just joking.
Cooper did not. That's the difference. So he did
What a
not
deal.
He did not start out that way. He was using leftover samples and creating blends and doing that.
Sure.
And he took like all the Sumatra samples, all the Colombia, all the Guat, and he made a blend of those.
I mean, in a way, that's kind of like a hugely poetic kind of creative endeavor to take the sample tailings and figure out how do I put these together to actually make them stable and consistent.
And if you're not connected to somebody that's an importer, you can buy Slack bags. Yeah. There's ways to get coffee on the cheap that will work for your startup.
Oh, for sure.
But he grew past the point of freebies and had to purchase, which changed everything.
Yeah.
But it also increased his pricing.
Sure.
So, but in both cases, in Cooper's case, his first car when he was 16 was a Corvette, a 2016 Corvette. He paid for this coffee earnings. He went to Japan to meet, this is when I was involved with the WBC, but met the SCAJ board members and was, visited the oldest living roaster. He was like 102, I think, at the time. He was fascinated with learning what coffee in Japan was like. And he's got a new product coming out that's very Japanese influence, a lot like James Freeman, which, he was really fascinated by. In those cases, I think that, and these are children doing this, an adult can easily do this home delivery regional off a Sona Fresco 1 kilo roaster in their garage and work pretty rapidly to a viable business. I would say within a 2 to 3 year time span, they could turn that hobby into a viable business. There was my submission.
And so let's get to that point. I mean, those are excellent examples.
Thank you.
Yeah, very compelling. And I mean, it's both to Blue Bottle's origin story as well as like what you've had going on. I mean, not to regress back to go backwards, but it's interesting. You must have a great stake in both businesses, being sort of the originator and then also holding the real estate interest, right? I mean,
I charge,
I'm sure,
reasonable
rent is 30%.
I don't fix everything. There's dangling hot wires and stuff in the garage, but I'm somewhat of a slumlord. But no, I have no stake in either business. I act as a mentor. I answer questions. I help them with blending, taught them cupping. But other than that, I stay completely out of the business because it really isn't about it. What my discussion with my son initially was, and with my stepchildren, was everything in life's a business. I didn't care if Cooper stayed in coffee or not. It was not important. And I said, if you become, everything's about a business. So if you're a musician, you got to sell your band. You got to promote yourself. Of course. You got to bill. You have to figure out how to get gigs. That's a sales job. If you're an academic, you have to write grants. You have to network. You have to sell yourself as an academic to continue your career. So everything is a business. And what you're going to learn, back when Mike and I were young, I'm not, you're a different generation, but when Mike and I were young kids, we had paper routes, and paper routes we had to collect money every month from the subscriber, or we washed cars, or we mowed lawns, and that all went away because of child labor laws. That's why you don't see children doing paper routes anymore. But in the business of Cooper's Coffee and Sequin, if the owner is a child, then it's not violation of child labor law. And at one point, Cooper was he wanted to franchise the idea of his business and sell it to families to teach children business skills. But the child would be the primary owner of the company. And yeah, so, but again, I stayed completely out of it. I did not want to be one of those stage parents. And
no,
this was never my goal.
I tease only.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, this is an aside, but my daughter has a fresh egg business that's very similar.
Right.
But in a culture where, you know, so often we're taught at an early age how to spend money, but not make money.
Well, that's exactly it. And when our kids were young, like online shopping was automatic for them. And it was like, well, do you realize what what it takes to earn the thing that you want?
Yeah, yeah.
And then they learned.
Yeah, the money is so abstract without that insight.
Right.
But all right, so let's get to the next step. So you just dropped the bomb on our listeners that in 2 to 3 years with a single kilo roaster,
right,
you believe you can go from hobby to business.
Yes.
And I should be clear that I'm not suggesting there is no opportunity in the specialty coffee space for roasters. I think that would be a ludicrous thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think the issue that I'm trying to take, that I want to be clear about, is that I don't believe that you can generate profit at a rate that in a sustainable way from a hobby perspective. Hey, this is hobby time with hobby capital expenditures.
Right.
Right. And it becomes a viable business. There still needs to be strategic capital infusions along the way. And I'm suggesting that there is a disconnect between hobby and business in that particular way.
Okay.
So what happens in your model
Right.
that hobbyist is not on a single kilo machine, right?
Right.
Let's suggest that for primo roast profiles, they're getting 2 finished roasted pounds out of 8 to 10 minutes of their time.
Right.
Right. At what volume? I mean, let's crunch the numbers on that time.
Right.
And then when are they generating? What are they getting? $4 to $7 a pound of margin.
Right.
Right. All in.
Right.
At what point are they able to self-generate the capital infusion within the business, right?
Sure.
From retained earnings to grow that business, because we know that you really to operate at any meaningful level wholesale or multi-unit retail, you probably need to enter at a 12 kilo production volume
To sustain
more.
a single person?
Whether it's a single person or to have a model where you are profiting and you can grow out of your profit and continue to profit more.
Right. Well, I mean, so in my particular scenario, if you had a 1 kilo roaster, you're roasting 8 pounds an hour finished. Because you're at home and, you know, what I saw in the case of my son is he was running the roaster sometimes 18 hours a day because it was a Sona Fresco. You didn't have to be there. It wasn't like navigating a drum roaster. And he chose that because of his age, 7 years old, to navigate a drum roaster.
You don't have to reload it every batch?
Yeah, you do. So every 10 minutes, he would be, you know, doing homework or, you know, doing whatever kids do. And his alarm would go off. I got to go reload, you know, real quickly. And so he, you know, in that frame at 8 pounds an hour, even if you did 10 hours a day, let's say, of mixed roasting, you're getting 80 pounds a day that he was selling for $15 a pound. And you could then buy 2 Sona Frescos, put them side by side, and you double that. That turns into income very quickly. And so you can easily begin to do that. Now, when he landed big accounts, he actually went the route of, instead of buying a 12 kilo roaster, he had that contract roasted by a local roaster where he brought the green and they charged him a fee. And all he was doing was delivering, because he realized it's too expensive to buy that roaster. So he could do the boutique stuff like micro lots on the Sona Fresco. And then his main blends that restaurants were buying and hotels were buying, he would actually have a local roaster do it. And that local roaster needed the volume to also further their, you know, keep their lights on.
Sure.
And that's the route he went. So in that sense, the capital infusion's minimal. It's buying the green. It's the marketing and branding. It's not investing in manufacturing.
Yeah. It's coffee as a brand rather than
Right.
coffee as a production.
Right.
But yeah, to this end, I was going to suggest, I mean, there's a fantastic example, coming out of what I would identify as a golden era of hobbyists turned businesses, which I would say is, somewhere in the like 2008 to 2012 window.
So when the economy collapsed.
I think there were a lot of people that returned to or founded personal interest within specialty coffee. It started to prove its worth as a recession-proof business. People out of their, disconnect and in some cases despair would pursue craft goods, and there was a real resurgence in like the pursuit of craft goods.
Well, so I would say because I don't mean to step over you, but
fine. Go ahead.
I would say it's not a resurgence in craft goods. Where coming from the West Coast, what I attributed 2008 to is when the tech bubble burst, people that had been working virtually for a long time were like, I don't want to be in the virtual world. I want to work with my hands.
Sure.
I want to. So you saw a growth in farming and leather,
craft goods.
But it was about, hand. It was about the hand.
That's what I mean. Craft,
and it was about, to me, it wasn't about, it's just a trend.
Goods.
It's real and it's tangible versus what I've been doing virtual.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that boom was kicked off by.
Absolutely.
I think you're absolutely right about that timeline.
So we have this fertile period in time, and we have one relatively local, very craft-minded, spent a ton of time in music, in pursuing jazz music and avant-garde music, studied knife making and Japanese traditions, and eventually just got interested in coffee and was so interested, right, that friends, family, passersby sort of started to take note of, wow, this guy loves coffee, loves specialty coffee, and is so interested in it. I want to be near to it. I want to enjoy coffee the same way. This turns into I don't recall the exact machine, but something a la Beemore, Sonafresco, a start where, hey, I have a farmer's market that's asking me to come and post up and show people awesome coffee once a week.
Yeah.
And this is where our paths crossed. He came to an introduction to cupping class back when I managed Coffee Solutions, right? This guy continues to, shine a light. He's like a lighthouse, just kind of spreading this coffee light, and people just gather around. And at a point, it becomes, what I'm trying to argue is completely unsustainable for him to even service this once a week coffee bar that he would pop up with his own roasted coffee and sell pounds. It happened so fast because of his energy and the attraction that he could not keep up with it in this way. He could not double the production, manage the time. He was working full time in other spaces. So his solution was to, at that moment, find an existing roastery that would sublet the facility, the roaster, the storage space, the cupping room, and immediately dropped everything and jumped in and turned the page from hobby to roaster, and has since become one of the most sought after roasters in Greater Boston, and regionally. You might know him as our esteemed guest of episode 30. This is Patrick Barter of Grace Note Coffee. We are super happy to be working.
I didn't realize that was his story. That's interesting.
Oh, wildly interesting individual, but it has worked very methodically to use particular roasting equipment for particular purposes all along the way, to the point where, there's been levers on using shared space, bringing in their own equipment as they've grown organically, but a company that without a significant and massive outside cash infusion has been able to grow from a true hobbyist to a true successful business.
Yeah, and what's interesting that you say about that is it does bring up the idea of using the growth in co-roast facilities, these, that are popping up,
Yeah.
to basically use that route again to avoid cash infusions, and just, the idea of shared spaces is one other avenue.
Yeah.
You're somewhat making my point for me, Todd.
Yeah, no, what I'm trying to get at, Mark, is that you have to have that type of ingenuity. And you also have
100%.
to lose the sort of ego attachment to, hey, here is my facility, my space, here is my machine. There is so much open capacity. There's never been more open capacity in drum roasters in North America and worldwide. And that, I think, is a Pandora's box for how today's hobbyist who's listening and looking in the mirror and saying, hey, me, I have the brand that I can grow. Either you can approach an existing roaster to white label that coffee and you drive the sales to eventually open that facility of your dreams, or, there are ways to collaborate. I know every roaster that I work with would want their drum to be spinning 24 hours a day.
24 hours a day. And that's just it. And I would say that, the spirit of the true entrepreneur is to have ingenuity. So this is a first test of whether or not you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur, is to shed the ego, and what is it going to take to get to your end goal. And right now you are correct. The resources are there in ways that did not exist when you and I got started. I couldn't have gone and borrowed somebody's facility. That was just completely unheard of. And now at almost every point in the United States, you can find that. And really, ultimately, as you grow your wholesale business, no matter where you are, the best scenario for you is to interact and have friendly relationships with your competitors, because you never know when you can help each other out. And that has I could tell a million stories about where direct competitors, I have, helped them out, and vice versa. But when it comes to the building of your business, the idea of, trying to utilize what's out there, like the old, in a community, the shared tool shed where, it's, why would you buy a shovel when somebody has a shovel and you could loan them a rake? And that way works. And especially nowadays with the new requirements from the FSMA to get your, food, to have a facility be approved to produce, coffee is expensive. It's way more expensive than when I got started. And so to start something on your own and then go into a facility is very cost prohibitive. And probably your point is 100% valid that you would need too much cash infusion to pull it off. But I think the shared resources angle is the way there. And I do think there is an advantage if you're a student and it's a side hustle, or if you're young, or if it's a hobby on the side, to get it to a certain point that you can make that leap off. That's going to always work. I think to just quit your job and do it, it probably, this scenario would be impossible to pull off.
Sure, I appreciate you taking my side.
Well, I'm a fair man.
Let's look at this from the other angle, right? What stops hobbyists from making the leap? Because it is a leap this is not unique to entering like the viable business space as we've so defined it. But like, what are the things that you see? And Mike, please, you've been quiet for uncomfortably long over here. What are the either the inhibitions, the choices that aren't made, the opportunities overlooked, or the justifiable reasons why people don't make that leap at that moment? When you look around and that the time has come and you can jump in with both feet, like, what is not happening? Why are people missing out?
Well, I would say, just on the surface, owning and operating your own business is not for everybody. It's a very hard thing to pull off, and only certain people have the skill set, the patience, and the ability to just keep getting knocked down and standing up again. Only certain people can do that. So that whittles that audience down. And then from there, it could be in their own internal market, wherever they live, it's overly saturated and they just don't see a hook. Like, how am I going to get to where I need to be viable when there's 75 roasters in a 10 square mile area? And some parts of the US are fairly saturated. And then I think listening to people and that are putting doubt in your head, I think losing your self-confidence would be one of them. I love the cocky, overly confident person because they are just willing to look past all of that. And even if they fail, they'll be okay with the failure. But you have to be, you have to be comfortable with risk. There's risk involved, but you mitigate that by not, by going to it as your full business when you're on stable, foundation, then you can make that leap. And I think that idea of building this clientele and like the story with Grace Note of doing it at a farmer's market and just doing it to see is this for you? And at some point, if you see momentum, there should be enough encouragement to take that leap.
Yeah. What Mark said. Also, we used to always say that you have people who are really good at business, not so great at coffee. And then you have people who are really great at coffee, but not so good at business. And you need both.
Right.
And so when I see something not going great, it's somebody often who's extremely passionate about the coffee, but doesn't have a business acumen. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to, how many great chefs do you know said, I'm going to start my own restaurant, and then they tank because your strength was in the back of the house. You don't have a clue as to the front of the house. And in that case, you need a partner, and you need a front of the house partner. With coffee, if you want to avoid a partner, you have to have both skill sets. It's essential. You have to be a salesperson first. I think learning the skills of roasting and blend, that's a learned subject. You could learn that, but learning how to sell, that's a tough thing to learn. It has to be in you, I think, to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, you seem to highlight the moment that I'm trying to get at, which, where you leap. I mean, I'll quote Steven Tyler of Boston's Aerosmith in saying, you have to quit your day job.
Did you say Boston's Aerosmith?
Yeah.
Do you need to, people aren't aware of that?
I'm just putting it out there. In saying you have to quit your day job, so then your night job has to work.
Right. Right.
And I don't know that I necessarily think that, in all the many ways that life can be composed, right, that is an essential necessity. But at some point, is that part of becoming a viable business? I mean,
yes, of course.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just a side hustle. And I would say to that point, the quitting of the day job to save your night job, if you watch the show Shark Tank, which a lot of people are in this space when they go pitch, they get the encouragement from the sharks right out of the gate. You need to quit your job and make this your full-time thing. And I think that many times they're giving that advice to do it too early. They're putting that person at risk because they don't have enough income to support their lifestyle. And they're being encouraged by billionaires to just take this leap and it's going to work. It only works when you know you have the momentum. And when you know that, okay, I'm picking up so many accounts and now I'm at a place where I can't keep up. That's when I would take the leap. But if I don't have that momentum, you just don't leap because you have a business and you want to go for it. You have to have support and customers that are liking the product and growth and some attention and, some buzz out there. If you're not feeling that, I would not take that leap yet. I would wait a little longer and keep it as a side hustle. If it's a hobby and it's not hurting anybody, you could do it as long as you want. And then at some point, if it catches on, you'll know when it's the right time.
Yeah. Classic customer journey. When your customers are out there as advocates, that's a really good sign. I mean, I think that's one of the signs of momentum.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, it's good. I mean, you seem to lead us to believe early on in the recording, you were saying you have dramatically over-prepared for this episode. What are we missing? I mean, we're getting to that portion of the show where we can kind of circle back around, or we can land the plane.
Yeah, there's nothing else. I mean, the over-preparation was our conversation last night where you were very doubtful of this as being a viable path, and I thought the James Freeman story just completely trumped. I don't think a lot of people...
What year was Blue Bottle founded?
2002. And I started in 91. So I was a pretty established business by the time he got going. And he took off almost immediately. It was crazy. But I don't think a lot of people would assume that's how Blue Bottle got started, as this garage-based business. I mean, it's like the classic Hewlett-Packard story, you know, like
but it is sewn into their. I think people know that.
Yeah,
like I think they put that forward as part of their story, and I do think like that kind of grassroots energy is a big part of their success.
Oh,
like,
of course.
Even if the details are somewhat murky. I mean, I think because it feels like what we were talking about earlier, like made goods, right? I mean, you go to any cafe, you see their bags, how they're presenting the brand. I mean, it's always been almost like understated, to present as handmade. And I think that that kind of craft, I wouldn't say low budget, but you know what I mean, in sort of suggesting that, because the budget is not low at all,
not
at
anymore.
This stage.
But when he started, it certainly was. I mean, his cafes, when I went and saw the first cafe, and it was literally a roll-up door in San Francisco with a cart jammed up against the front, and you know, literally a 5-pound bag cut and dumped upside down in the hopper, and the line of people. I knew he was onto something. He was doing something that, I mean, there was a lot of coffee players in San Francisco. This was nothing new, but he was doing something different, and he was doing it on such a low budget and having such return on his investment versus other players there that, you know, were building these big elaborate cafes in like the financial district in areas that you knew they were paying top dollar. And how do those numbers work out? You know, in some of these, you know, where I live, there are coffee houses that are paying $11,000 to $12,000 a month in rent. And if you do the math, it's like, how many cups of coffee just to even pay the bills are you having to sell? And it doesn't make sense. That becomes a marketing tool. But, you know, James would have found a funky back alley space and paid somebody some cheap monthly rent, and he pulled it off. And those original Blue Bottles were a bunch of those ideas. And, you know, just like I was obsessed back, and then there was the Mud Truck, which is in New York. And these were like food trucks that were doing coffee. And he had a cool, you know, these orange trucks, and he was building them all throughout the city. And it worked for his brand at the time. And I love, those are the businesses that always attracted and impressed me. I was never impressed with just the multi-store chain that just kept popping up locations. It's like, yeah, but that's just the fast food business at that point. And that kind of grit and determination by people that don't have a lot of money and do creative things.
It's always where the trend is set.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's where the trends are set.
Always. Yeah. Yeah. No, you make a good point. I mean, if I could describe the knitwear you brought to the table today for our listeners,
knitwear,
I think it makes what you're saying all the more impressive. It's a forest green cardigan with a roll top. It's quite nice. You must feel good about that.
Yes, thank you.
Good, awesome.
Yeah, speaking of that, I mean, they're not a sponsor of the show yet, but they could be. I'm a massive fan of good knitwear. For starters, I don't know if you know this about me, Todd. Mr. Knit is what they call me.
We've never talked about it directly, but yeah, hey, lay it on us.
But when I was working in Portland at Sustainable Harvest, I stumbled upon Dehen 1920, and I don't know if you know the brand.
No.
So it's an old knittery that goes back to the turn of the century, the last century, and if you could imagine, like the 1950s Letterman sweater, that super thick sweater that probably weighed 5 pounds. That's what they're doing today. And so they do, you know, sweaters and cardigans and, you know, heavy duty stuff. And I think they call it like heavy duty old school truth and their beanies are like, I mean, the weight of them are incredible. And they have this old knitting mill in downtown Portland. And every product I touch of theirs is just so over the top, amazingly built.
Do they retail out of Portland or
but they have an online presence. Dehen 1920. And if you're Dehen, Dehen.
Okay.
And on eBay, you'll see them come up, but they hold their value. I mean, they're spendy, but they're stuff that will last you, your children, your grandchildren.
Oh, yeah.
You're not going to wear it out. So yes, that sent me on the journey of going after high quality knitwear, which thank you for.
Wow, I'm surprised it took you that long. You didn't have a knitwear side to your. You didn't have a knitwear side to your.
I didn't know much. Well, I live in a
wardrobe?
warm climate, so when do I get to wear it?
I guess that's
yeah,
true.
yeah. No, I knew sport coats. That was my thing. Ties.
Yeah, but a blazer compared to a sweater.
A light summery blazer. I like a ghost blazer. It's a very light fabric. Or,
Awesome. Well, it seems like we've expired.
Mike, are you awake?
Subject matter.
No, I was just, enjoying the free ad.
And we're not beyond advertisers. So
Hey,
yeah.
Get in touch.
Speaking of viable business models.
Yeah. Well, hey, I do want to say this is, this conversation went a few exciting ways. I hope that everyone's enjoyed. I trust there's a lot to pick on, or pick out, I should say, out of what we've offered. I do wish we heard from Mike Ferguson a bit more.
I'm just here to keep the train running.
I mean, hey, that mic is on for a reason.
Well, now he's got all the sound effects ready to go. I mean,
know.
this is the real deal.
The budget's gone up.
I could tell. Yeah. But I just got to say, before we wrap up, I cannot be more thrilled that we're doing this again. Yeah. This is like if this was the job that I was coming back to as a full-time podcaster, I would have taken this in a heartbeat, because this is it was so much fun when we were doing it in the first 2 seasons, and I cannot wait to build on this moving forward.
Yeah,
so,
man. Hey,
great.
I will reiterate Mike's sentiment and say, welcome home.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Happy to be
Appreciate it.
You've been listening to The Exchange, presented by Covoya Specialty Coffee, hosted by Mark Inman and Todd Mackey, and produced by Mike Ferguson. Our opening theme was Growing Up by user 298-11401. Our closing theme is Hobby Cash Flow by Brenton Davis. All music is free use. Thanks for listening, and now your postscript.
All right, everybody, reach under your chair.